trans woman and female rights activist have a fiery debate over changing rooms. So every TV debate like this I've watched so far, the person on the trans side has been pretty terrible. There's several videos on my YouTube you can watch if you go to youtube.com/themarychu live. I've put a bunch of clips on there from past streams, watching these people because they're the ones representing us, right? They're the ones going out there advocating for us. But when they say advocating for us, normally it's just diverting the conversation. They're never talking about the actual question that's being raised. And to me, that's pointless. You know, they're often just making fools of themselves instead, like grandstanding. I don't know who the trans woman is in this case. Does it say? It doesn't say. So he's gonna introduce them, I guess. Let's see. This is trans woman and female rights activist have a fiery debate over changing rooms.
Afternoon, Christo in for Ian Collins. We're discussing the controversy around the gender recognition debate, the gender reform bill, which would change the way in which gender recognition certificates are issued to those people who have gender dysphoria, who wish to live as a different gender to the one that doesn't match the sex that they were assigned at birth. Now, I want to make it clear, I want there to be a solution to this. I believe that exists. I believe that you are able, that there are people who are unfortunately, though in many cases it can turn out to be a very happy experience for them eventually, it's unfortunate that they can live in a different gender to the sex that they've been assigned at, that they can feel like they are a fraud, have a terrible time of it. We just heard, actually, we were still joined by them, Zoe Chaney and is a trans woman and entrepreneur, and Susan Smith.
I've seen her before, I think. I think she spoke to, was it Frida Wallace? I think it was. She laughed in her face, which is the natural response to Frida Wallace, quite frankly. It's probably what I'd do as well. I know I wouldn't. I don't act like that, but yeah. And then this person is the trans person. This Christo guy, I'm pretty sure this is like a rightoid kind of channel, mainly. But he seems like he says that there's got to be a solution for this. And I've seen him speak to, I think it was Felix Fern, kind of expressing similar stuff. So I kind of, I like his approach. But let's see.
Director for Women Scotland. And Susan, I want to turn to you actually, because we just heard from Zoe there, a trans woman saying that, look, for years I would have loved to have been something else. I would have loved to have not been in this situation. I lived in my new gender for 2 years until I had the full assignment surgery. What is the position of For Women Scotland? Do you believe what you're hearing from Zoe? Do you believe that people with gender dysphoria exist? And do you have sympathy for the plight of people like Zoe to get to where they are?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, gender dysphoria, I think it must be a horrific thing, as with any form of body dysmorphia, psychologically very crippling. And, I think what we've got to, this is a terrible position in many ways, because obviously there was the GRA passed in 2004, and it was supposed to be about a very small number of people, because thankfully only a small number of people do have gender dysphoria.
That's true.
And it was to help those people. And I think there was always a bit of a social contract between the people who, I suppose one might describe them as old-style transsexuals, who had gone through this process and were acutely aware that of all the kind of nuance that sex is different to their feelings, and that they had a responsibility to make sure that the system wasn't abused and all of that sort of thing. This bill isn't about people with gender dysphoria. I mean, one of the really astonishing things during this whole debate has been the fact that there's no definitions in this bill. There's no definition of what a trans person is, although we have been told that many trans people don't have gender dysphoria, that they're perfectly happy with their
That's a really good point, is to like, there's no definitions. For me, I think trans should be defined, and it's pretty easy to define it if you're just going to say it's people with gender dysphoria for whom gender transition is the treatment. Like, to me, that makes sense. That's not exclusionary, it's a definition. If something has no definition, then yeah, it's more inclusive, but it also is meaningless.
Bodies. So it's been a really strange thing that there is seemingly a group of people in Scotland who are perfectly happy to walk around looking like men and with full beards and everything else, who apparently still need to get this recognition. Call me cynical.
Here's a huge point that no one ever answers. Like, why would you transition if you don't have gender dysphoria? What's wrong then? Like, what's the problem? Either you do or you don't, you know? And maybe some of them do but are in denial, but they're still transition. I don't know. I can't square it. I'm really trying to understand that's a thing. And it's not really my fault that every time a trans person, I haven't seen this person speak yet, so I don't know if I'm including this person in it. But every time it's just been bullshit. And there has to be a better definition for something than just what whoever says they are. Like, am I a attack helicopter? Well, if I say I am, okay, I'm an attack helicopter. Like, there's got to be something more than that.
But I don't think that was what the original legislation was designed for. I think it was designed for this small group of people. And so
I think that's...
so he's right. This is rebounding on the whole community.
And I think you've absolutely nailed, both of you actually, where things seem to have shifted. Because, you know, weirdly, I think as a society we were really tolerant of what used to be transsexuals, and we...
Kinda. It's not amazing. But I mean, I don't know. It's only in the last few years that I've experienced like people shouting like paedophile out of van windows and stuff. I didn't really used to get like the nonce stuff ever. And it's happened one time, I say, you know. I get very little shit in the street from people. Maybe it's because I'm like 5'10" and I work out.
Used to get that some people would change through surgery. I think where it became really toxic was when it was that someone would not change their appearance surgically and not have any of the what is required surgically.
What he's describing to me is not trans. I've known people that appropriate trans identity but don't change anything about themselves. To me, that's not trans. Like, if you're a woman who calls herself a man and that's all there is to it, then what's different about you? How are you not just still a woman?
Meaning that someone who can present as male with male body parts can say, actually, I feel that I am female. My gender is female, even though I present as a male. I have male body parts. So therefore, I can use female facilities. There is where it started to get really toxic. But there are going to be people, and Zoe, I'll come back to you, who say, well, look, we still need to protect the rights of those people. If you are someone who presents as a man and has male genitalia, but you say, well, I feel like I'm a woman, what's the solution there? Should those people who are probably being targeted by this new way of getting gender recognition, what's the solution there?
Damn good question.
I don't believe there is a solution, by the way. I don't believe there is a solution.
I think that person that you just described is I've never met one.
If you've never met someone like that, this is from 2022, right at the end of 2022. I find it hard to believe that this person doesn't know anyone like that. But maybe they're interpreting it differently. I don't know.
One of those people. Maybe they exist. I have no idea.
So we're either feigning ignorance or maybe she just doesn't know any of these people, but they're fucking out there. Like, you want to go on Twitter and tell me that he didn't just describe a whole bunch of those people? Like, go anywhere, honestly. It's not hard to find these people.
I mean, on my journey, after I became me full time, and I had my 2 years before the surgery, I'm a member of a gym. I go 5 times a week. I'm very sporty. And I had to then decide, okay, which change hormone am I going to use? Well, I'm on hormones. I've grown hair. I've grown boobs, and I can hardly stroll into the men's changing room. I mean, that would be thoroughly inappropriate everywhere.
I think something like this is where like intent comes into play a bit, because I felt the same way. Like, I used the men's toilet for as long as I could until people just kept fucking staring at me. And it's a bit difficult to use the toilet when people are staring at you and like, you know, muttering things to themselves. So I did eventually use the women's toilet pre-surgery. No one ever saw it because, you know, you go in the store, you know, you don't show it off. That's the last thing a person with dysphoria would do. And if someone's that happy showing off their dick in the girls' changing rooms or the women's toilet or whatever, do they really have dysphoria? Like, you gotta wonder about that. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I think intention matters a lot.
Which way, even though I still had male genitalia.
So were you still using
when I say intention, I mean intention to get surgery. And, you know, intention to live as a woman, which even your whole self is evidence of. I mean, I look at someone like that, clearly they're living as a woman, right? You know, that's not the kind of person that I'd look at and be like, are you actually trans or not? Like, I fully believe that with that person. Well, let's see.
female changing room whilst having a penis?
Yes, but with respect. So if I was changing the bottom half of me, I would find a cubicle, and if it wasn't a cubicle, I'd go into the toilet cubicle.
I don't have a problem with this because she's clearly trans. It's when they start, like that example we saw earlier from the Blair White video, with what very much just looks like a guy having a shave in the women's changing room. That's different to me than someone like this pre-op using the changing room. That's a completely different scenario to me, because that person just looks straight up like a man. You might see a trans woman and think, oh, there's some odd features there, like their jaw's a bit square, you know, they've got kind of a big forehead or whatever, kind of a heavy brow. But you know, I don't know. I've never had any shit using women's toilets, and I've been post-op for a long time now. So even if someone does have a problem with it, it's like, well, I don't know. I feel like I have the right genitalia to be here, personally, but okay. But yeah, I don't think it's the same, someone like this, as someone who straight up doesn't pass.
And change there with a locked door. There's no way that I agree with a lot of the more extreme trans voice you hear, that because they identify as a woman, they should be able to walk through a
but
female.
There will still be.
Yeah, so far I'm basically agreeing with this person, although I find it odd that they haven't met more kind of non-passing trans people.
Zoe, but there will still be some women, and Susan, I don't want to put words into your mouth, I don't know if you're one of them, that would still say, well, I'm sorry, the fact that those body parts still exist, there is no way that those, I mean, what do you think, Susan?
The problem with that, and she's going to answer, she might say a similar thing, she might say something completely different because she probably disagrees, but you have to know that they have it. Like, she's telling you she's had it because this is the debate. But if you just saw her out in public, would you honestly know? I mean, I'm not the most passing person ever. I do my best. I haven't particularly tried hard today. I've got a fucking headache. What do you want me to do? I'm just at home. I don't give a shit. But, you know, I don't get shit. You know, I've used a lot of fucking public toilets in my life. I've used a lot of public toilets for jobs, you know, where there's an office bathroom, shit like that. There's never been any problems. And there never would be, because, you know, if the penis is the problem, that's not there. So what do you want me to do? I know. Let's see what she says.
Susan, even if someone is like Zoe, who is living as a woman, is preparing for surgery, but still has male genitalia, is there a place for a person like that in women's spaces?
I don't think so, because I think that, you know, women have...
But even with the mitigation that Zoe has outlined, that she would go into a cubicle, she would be very, very respectful. What do you say to that?
No, because now we've got to a point where it's very hard to say where that line is, and I think that line has to be. We've got to a point, and this is what this debate has brought us to. We've got to a point where we have to have a line about sex, and we certainly have to have a line about things like male genitalia and women's changing rooms. I think.
I still think, isn't the problem more if someone sees them? And then obviously you get into the whole thing, well, how do you even determine that someone's got a penis? Like, how are you going to stop people doing it? Especially if they look like women and you can't tell, and they're not doing anything to anyone. Let's see.
Third spaces are something that hasn't been talked about, and probably is an option not just for...
Third spaces would put a lot of onus on like businesses, etc., to put those third spaces in. Like, who's paying for that? What if they don't have much room with the toilets that already exist? Do they have to like completely rejig them, potentially take some of the women's and the men's to do that? You know, isn't that still kind of taking from women in a way? I don't know.
For people who are trans, but maybe for people who might have caring, be looking after someone of the opposite sex, caring responsibilities. So third spaces would probably be helpful in those scenarios. One thing I wanted to say as well on this bill.
I really wish she'd I wish she'd be more stoic. That's something I definitely need to. I think I do okay, but if I talk to people, I definitely need to not like react. That Demon Mama that we watched just now, before this one, she used to do all these like crazy faces, like when people are debating her, like when it's something she disagrees with, it's like, and like, all this like, because it's a ridiculous point in her opinion. Like, she's not going that far, but you can see the emotional reactions, and you're really betraying yourself when you do that, unfortunately.
And this process that has really concerned us is the impact on younger people, because we've spoken about the reflection period that Zoe and others have had. And I think one of the reasons that was in the original act was to allow people the space to get counselling and to evaluate how they really take time over a really quite serious decision. We're especially worried about children, and the Cass report has highlighted a lot of the issues, especially around girls. We have the same issues in the clinics in Scotland, and they are rushing ahead. And now we have the possibility that 16 and 17-year-olds can get these GRCs, and the evidence from other countries is that, and the evidence in Cass is that once you start to affirm people, they will seek out medicalised processes without act.
Yeah, regarding the young people, I swing more to her point, and I don't know what this person's going to say about young people, to be fair. To me, it's really dicey. Kids are a lot more impressionable. They go through phases. I think what we're seeing in like the US especially, I think it might well lead to like a wave of like detransitioners, like much more regret than there has been. And it's going to be interesting if that does happen, to see how like the trans communities respond. Because the only thing I ever see in any acknowledgement of detransitioners who regret transitioning is, oh, well, it's a small number. There's never any like meaningful... And, if you try and get more information, it's usually like, oh, they're like right-wing grifters or some shit. So it's bullshit. But like, yeah, I've really seen a lack of empathy towards those kind of people, because it's inconvenient. It doesn't have to be inconvenient, because someone regretting it doesn't mean that everyone should regret it. And that should be obvious.
Actually having gone
okay,
through
let me get Zoe to respond to both of those points. Because Zoe, I saw you were shaking your head, because it must be difficult for you to...
Yeah, you betray yourself when you do that, trust me. just try and absorb the points. Try not to show emotion. It's just easier that way.
Hear that even when you were sort of carrying out those mitigations, and I actually understand Susan's position. Susan, you don't sound like a sort of raving, extremist. I understand why you would be saying... someone who has male genitalia, it's really difficult to hear that they're in a women's changing room. But what's your response to that?
It's like gestures. Sometimes it's like he's using the force, like something like that. I don't know. What the... I'm so sorry. It's the camera looking like. We're fine. Let's just keep going.
Zoe.
it is difficult, and I appreciate it's difficult. But again, if, in my opinion, it's about finding a mid ground. It's trying to be reasonable and respectful.
Is it a third changing room, maybe?
I don't think so personally.
You could do a third changing room, and I would have been happy to use that. That wouldn't have bothered me. But most places don't have it and won't be able to afford to put one in. They won't have space.
Hey, what did I say about businesses having to pay for like rejigging all their stuff? Huh.
Etc. Etc. There's lots of public swimming pools these days that only ever have one changing room anyway, and lots of
Really? I didn't even know that. I'd have to look into that, but hey.
private lockable cubicles within that changing room. Nobody seems to. That was well before the trans debate became an issue. No one ever had a problem with that. And if I'm
To be fair, times change.
going into, or now obviously I've had the surgery, but before the surgery, how dangerous would it have been for me to go into a men's changing room? That would have been utterly perverse. And if I'm going to go in, I need to go.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to use the men's. You get stared at, you get all that shit. Because people see what they see, and people just kind of gender you based on what you look like. So if you look like a woman, you're probably going to be fine, as long as you keep it away. If you're only ever getting it out behind a locked door that no one else can see, and you look like a woman, then who's ever going to know anyway? You know, and the changing room stuff, it's so difficult to enforce is the other thing. Like, I agree with gender criticals on some things, but they have quite a few very unrealistic positions that I don't think they're ever going to see much movement on, because, you know, toilets especially, like, no one's policing who goes in and who goes out. And how would they? Would you have to, like, pull your pants down? Like, who's going to want to pull their pants down for, like, a security guard to check that you've got the right genitalia, you know? So it's a bit unrealistic, and I'm kind of, this one is doing a lot better than the other ones. I'll certainly say that.
Going to a changing room. So if I've got to pick one of the two, I'm going to pick the women's one.
No, I understand, because otherwise you'd end up in a situation where with someone then with breasts in a male changing room. I understand it. Look, I really appreciate the debate. You've been so respectful, the two of you, about it, and I'm so glad that we were able to have it without it becoming...
Have a fiery debate. They kind of led me on here. I was expecting more.
...as toxic as we see some of these debates becoming. So
yes, true. Most of them are fucking toxic as shit. Okay. I agree with the trans woman more than the other woman. There we go. I'm not a TERF after all. Great.
Thank you for that.
Cool. That was pretty interesting. Yeah, I more or less agreed with the trans woman on most things. And I think the gender critical side is quite unrealistic in that sense.